And welcome back. We're finally talking about the lens that I've been lasting since the moment it was launched. Actually, since the moment it was launched for another camera system, which was the Sony APS-C mirrorless mount. And we're talking about the Tamron 70mm to 70 f2.8 DI 3A VCRXD. It's a mouthful. I've always been a fan of Tamron lenses. I've been using Tamron's lenses for years. And with my full frame Nikon gear, I had a lot of Tamrons, and I've always been satisfied with what they were bringing to the table for the price. And speaking of price, the real reason why I haven't purchased this lens, despite the fact that I've been lasting after it for months, was exactly the price. At almost 900 euros or dollars, it's tough to purchase a lens like this, which competes directly with the 16 to 55 from Fuji at a roughly similar price. And so I've never pulled the trigger on this lens because of that. And let me plug into this to say that this video is sponsored by me, as I purchase this lens as usual most of the time. But I finally pulled the trigger on this because I found this lens on Amazon with a super deal at 660 euros, and I couldn't skip on this. So when I saw it, I just purchased it, and I was eager to use it and test it because I was really curious to see what Tamron was going to bring on the table, especially after I had a bad experience with the 18 to 300. Link to the video up here or here. I never remember. But without any further ado, let's just jump into it and let's talk about this lens. From a build quality standpoint, this lens is really good. It feels very, very solid. It's not super lightweight. It's approximately 530 grams, but it's not even super heavyweight either. So it fits pretty good with an XH2 camera. I think it'll feel a little bit more front heavy on other smaller cameras from Fujifilm. It is a stabilized lens, which is a good thing to have, although newer IBIS systems are getting really good really soon. And it is weather sealed, and it doesn't have an aperture ring like most of this Tamron lenses. It's got the zooming ring in the front, up at the front, which is different from what Fuji does, and it's got the focusing ring here at the back of the lens. It has a 67 millimeters filter thread. It's got 9 rounded aperture for smooth bokeh, and we'll talk about it later. And it extends while zooming, but as you can see, it doesn't extend too much. Now, a lens can be built as good as we want, can be as cheap as we want, it can be all of what we want, but if it doesn't support it with a good image quality, it's not worth it. Now, let me remind you that since I got the XH2, all of the tests for image quality are done with the 40 megapixel sensor. But let's just start from sharpness, and let's say that at 70 millimeters, the lens is already very sharp, wide open, especially in the center, with visible vignetting, and corners are not as good as the center, but they're definitely decent. As you stop down at f4, most of the vignetting is gone, and the overall sharpness evens out a little bit more, although the center has another step forward. From 5.6, vignetting is basically gone. Corners get better, but never reach the same quality of the image center. We're talking about very small difference though. So corners are already usable at f2.8. It's just that the center is so good that corners can't reach the image quality of the center. But in general, the lens is very, very usable at 17 millimeters straight from f2.8. Moving at 23 millimeters, the image is generally sharper than 17, and there's no surprise there because usually it zooms at the extremes of their zooming range or at their weakest spot. And it is really sharp straight from f2.8 already in the corners, although again they don't match exactly what the lens can do in the center. And until f5.6 the corners start getting better and better, to the point where again at f5.6 they reach the quality of the center. Vignetting is very minimal at f2.8 and it's basically gone once you stop down. At 35 and 50 millimeters, the lens is basically perfect from f2.8, so wide open from corner to corner. So very even image quality, very sharp lens. There's basically no vignetting at all. You stop down, you can get a little bit of sharpness increase if you get to f5.6, but again, the lens is very sharp at f2.8, and the increase that you get is just because you stop down because you want to stop down, not because you need to get the maximum sharpness. I don't know if that makes sense to you. At 70 millimeters, that's where the lens shows its weakest spot, as at f2.8 the lens is sharp, especially in the center, while corners lag a little bit behind. It's not that it's not usable, it's just that it's so good at 35 and 50 that 70 is just a little bit behind. Corners, again, as I said, are a little bit behind as well, and as you stop down they get better, and you get really good corners also at f5.6. Diffraction starts to kick in at f11, where the image is still usable, not a big deal there, while at f16 you have a pretty decent amount of drop of quality, and at f22 you get a very soft image. Now, mind you, this is more because of the resolution of the camera more than the lens issue itself. Just bear that in mind. The lens can focus decently close, actually fairly close. It's not a micro lens, don't get me wrong, but it can get you good details. But if you get to the real minimum focusing distance, you can get a little bit of softness, especially if you zoom in. While at the widest focal length ranges it is better even when focusing very close. The bokeh is good. It's not spectacular, but it's really good. It's definitely good looking. I don't mind the bokeh. At times it can be a little bit jerky when you have something specific in the background, but in general it's not that bad. Actually, it's good. I like it, and the 9 blades definitely help on that. It's not the best lens when it comes to sun stars. They get decent at f11, but they're not something you would write home about. Like, they're good, but they're not great. The resistance to frame is really good at 17 millimeters, so at the wide focal range, while when you zoom in and you get to 70 millimeters, you definitely get an impact when you have a bright object, a bright source of light getting in the frame. You can see it right now. Purple fringing is very well controlled. You can get some here and there, especially when it's wide open, but you really need to look for it, at least from my first experience with this lens. And colors are really nice. So in general, image quality is really good throughout the zooming range. Of course, being a zoom lens, usually the two extremes are not the best of the best, but they're really good even at 17 and 70 millimeters. But in general, the lens is really good. It's really usable for pretty much anything you can think about using it for. You can use it for professional use for sure. Very quick on the autofocus. The autofocus is really reliable and fast and silent. So I haven't run a specific test, as I realized that pretty much any lens with the new Fujifilm cameras, especially with stills, autofocus is really good. So I didn't spend too much time testing it. I had, however, several shooting conditions where it never failed me. So I'm really happy with the autofocus that I get with this lens, especially from a reliability standpoint. But also, again, it's fast and it's silent. When it comes to video, I'm gonna be very quick on this as well. I haven't shot it too much. I haven't had any chance to use it for professional use for video. So take what I'm saying with a grain of salt. The stabilization on the lens is a good addition, although it's hard to tell whether it's the lens that is stabilizing good or it's the camera. As you probably know, you cannot decide to turn one of the two off, which is something that I keep complaining about, but I guess I'm never gonna get added as an option with Fujifilm. And the autofocus is pretty fast, meaning that it's reliable in tracking, but with like all other lenses, so that's why I keep saying it's probably a camera issue more than a lens issue. The focus transition is not that great. It never goes smoothly from like close to distance and back. It never happens smoothly. There's always an hesitation, and I keep saying it's probably the camera's fault and not the lens's fault. The aperture, when used as your only variable parameter, doesn't move smoothly, so it goes in thirds of stop, and you see that in video. So it's not the best way of shooting video. So in that case, you better use an ND filter to manipulate the light more than the aperture. Of course, if you want to play with depth of field, it's a different story, but I don't think you would do that with a normal photography lens adapted for video. You would need a video lens to be able to do that pretty smoothly. One thing I forgot is to mention that focus breathing is basically non-existent, which is really good for a lens like this, because it helps using it for video with no problems. Although again, the focusing transition may not be as smooth as we all want it. In general, however, this lens seems to be very usable for video, but again, I'll need to test it more to make sure that my impressions are actually confirmed in the field. In conclusion, thanks to Fujifilm's decision finally after years to open its protocol to third-party manufacturers, we finally are allowed to put our hands on lenses like this, which are really refreshing for the Fujifilm lineup, because there's nothing comparable, honestly. Because yes, you have the 16 to 55, but again, the range is narrower and that lens is not stabilized. This one is. The lens is well built. It is fast and accurate when it comes to focus. The image quality is really good, and it's extended focal range at f2.8 constant aperture is something that can be really helpful in several conditions. It is not a small lens by any means, although it's not huge, and it's not cheap either, unless you find a deal like I did. In that case, I would call it cheap. I'm pretty sure you're interested in a comparison between the other f2.8 alternatives that you have, namely the 18 to 50 from Sigma, and more than anything else, the 16 to 55 f2.8 from Fuji. Let me know in the comments if you are, because I may think about doing a video specifically on that. I actually owe you one already, so I can add to that and make it just one. In my opinion, this lens is really good for any use that you can think of. It is perfect for, this is the lens that you would use for like events, weddings, maybe completing the package with a super wide angle lens. More on that later. But it's also good for landscapes. It's good for even portraits, because it is really good at 70mm f2.8. It's good at the little bit of more of softness. If you use it for portraits, it's not actually bad, because it is still sharp but not overly sharp. And so to me, for this lens, is a huge thumbs up. And not only that, it makes me really curious to see what Tamron is about to launch, meaning the 11 to 20mm f2.8. I know it's already out for Sony, but I'm really curious to test on my Fujifilm cameras, because that can be a really great combination, which comes at a budget and can solve a lot of problems for professional use. I guess that's it for today. Let me know in the comment what you think about this lens, if there's something that I missed and you want me to further test. Again, this is an initial review. It's not a final review. I've been using the lens for a week, slightly more than a week, although I've been using it intensively. And don't forget to subscribe and like this video if you haven't already. As I said, that's it for today. Ciao, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.